Well, it's finally here. The last of the Indiana Jones movies, that is. I say it's the last since it's been 15 years since the fourth movie came out, and I don't imagine Harrison Ford cracking the whip at 95 years old, even with special effects.
It would be an understatement to say that I'm hyped for the film, since the Indiana Jones movies are my two favorite movies of all time. Raiders and Crusade, of course. And Harrison Ford just happens to be my favorite actor as well. So today I feel like playing a classic for the SNES, Indiana Jones' Greatest Adventures. Legend has it that it's a pretty decent movie-based game, all things considered, and in fact I'd say it's pretty fun. And a must-play for any fan of the franchise. Trust me. Booting up the game, you're greeted by the main menu featuring Indy's stern face glaring at you like, "You sure you want to play?" A question every gamer must ask themselves. Even the box asks you, "Are you Indy enough?" Whatever that means. Even Dr. Jones on the back of the box looks confused by the question. That's like asking, "Are you Mario enough to play Mario Bros?" Anyway, the game features stills from the actual movie during the cutscenes between levels, starting with the first scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark, though the dialogue doesn't really match what was said in the movie. The first level begins with Indy inside the cave to retrieve the idol. The sprites and artwork of the game actually look really good for the SNES, and I'm really impressed with Indy's design, and everything else is really easily recognizable from the movies. So good job to the developers on that. You're armed with your trusty whip and grenades from the start, since I guess Indy always used grenades in the movies? Yeah, grenades. Anyway, they're incredibly useful in a pinch, since they basically wipe out all the enemies on screen. The design for the first level is really great. I like running through the cave, jumping over bottomless pits and pools filled with attacking piranha. You can also use your whip to swing over these obstacles or dodge roll to avoid traps, just like Indy would in the movie. The platforming reminds me of Super Castlevania 4, with all the whipping, tight jumps, and knockback you get with any damage you take. It even has those annoying bats from Castlevania. Bats. Why'd it have to be bats? The next stage is the classic boulder scene from Raiders, which is a must if you're going to make a Indiana Jones game. However, they miss the mark here a bit. You don't get much room to see what's coming ahead in front of you, and you basically need to memorize the course to get through the stage. It kinda reminds me of the snowboarding part in Mega Man 8's Frostman stage. This ends up being more frustrating than fun, since you have to restart the level if you make a couple mistakes. I think this part would have been a lot better if the developers simply gave the player more visibility in front to see what's coming up ahead. Next, you travel to Nepal to find Marion Ravenwood's bar. And I like how the game shows you flying over the map, just like in the movie. You'll hear me saying that a lot, just like in the movie, which is what you want in a movie-based game like this. I think the more references to the original film, the better. The next stage is pretty well made. Indy trucks through the snowy landscape, dodging deathly snowballs and cartoonish-looking wolves. The platforming is basically the same as the first level, except there's a lot more steep inclines and precise jumps that need to be made. Indy reaches Ravenwood's bar, which is already on fire. I guess Marion fought off those bad guys herself in the game, and Indy arrives late only to climb the 100-story building that is Ravenwood's bar. This level kinda reminds me of Super Metroid, where Samus has to escape the area before everything goes boom. Except as Indy, you're just trying to outrun the flames as you frantically search for a way up. Seriously, how hard is it to get up this level? Look at this part. How am I supposed to get up there? Look at how wide this jump is. I'm supposed to use this box to help me get up, but if you don't move it in just the right way, it gets stuck and then you're dead. Oh great, now it's gone. Guess I'm toast. Okay, try this again. Phew, it finally worked. Don't know how, I pretty much did the exact same thing, but I want to live. Unlike these guys in the background enjoying their drinks before happily perishing in the fire. Anyway, once you reach the top, it's time to whip at the creepy Nazi guy's feet as he prances around the platforms like a gazelle. All while Miriam just stands there holding out the medallion like, "Hey, look what I got!" This part's a little difficult when the ground starts to fall, but it doesn't ruin it for me. The Streets of Cairo stages have a kind of chaotic feel to them. Indy has to constantly find his way up and around these obstacles, all while dodging enemies and falling pottery. I used to think this was one of those where the hell do I go stages, but now I feel like it actually fits with the vibe of the movie. This part feels chaotic and flustered, just how Indy felt running through the busy streets of Cairo looking for Marion. And also not to mention the SNES versions of the original soundtrack by John Williams really do this level justice. But that doesn't mean this level is perfect. With the kind of clunky mechanics, it just gets really frustrating on the 5th attempt you try to get up this building. What was that? Well, at least they added the classic bit where Indy one-shots the big bad guy with the sword. Nice. You have a mini-boss section where you chase down a wagon to beat up the buff guy from the airplane scene? Just like in the movie? So then you're in the Germans' dig site, which looks great by the way, though it would have been a nice touch to have Indy in different looks that match what he was wearing during those scenes in the film these levels are based on. Like in this stage, Indy should have been wearing his disguise as a digger to hide from the Germans. Then you reach the Well of Souls, where Indy has to navigate through this kind of labyrinth of platforms and moving floors and walls. It's a little weird to me though that they have bad guys already patrolling the Well of Souls. I mean, Indy and Sala were the first ones there, but I guess they needed some other enemies in this section other than just snakes. But it's even more strange when Belloc seals Indy inside the Well of Souls. Yet there are still bad guys patrolling in here with Indy. So that means Belloc sacrificed his own men. Anyway, after roaming around in the dark, you find your way out and make it to the final level before the main boss. There's not a lot to say about this one. It's just another run to the right platforming section where the main changes here are just in the landscape. Finally, you reach the Ark of the Covenant, only to be attacked by Belloc, jumping like a frog while casting ghosts at you. Belloc. Defeating Belloc is a bit anticlimactic because he just fades away in flames like every other enemy. It would have been nice to see him explode like he does in the movie, or at least have a cutscene here, but it goes from you defeating Belloc to the last scene of the film where the Ark of the Covenant is being put into storage. You're now in the Temple of Doom, the second movie, starting off with the Chinese restaurant scene where Indy is being shot at while looking for the vial of antidote. Except here, you're just getting chased by two gun sights, like Mario getting chased by the angry sun in Mario Bros. 3. Again, it would have been nice to have Indy in a different costume like his white tux, the same that he was wearing in the movie. Indy jumps out of the window and starts the next level by falling through multiple awnings, just like in the movie. This level is a lot like the Streets of Cairo, as you have to find your way up and around these buildings, but here you have much less room to stand on these small platforms. By now you might be sick of hearing the same soundtracks over and over. That's because for whatever reason, the developers used most of the music from Raiders and a couple tracks from Temple of Doom, but nothing from The Last Crusade. Huge miss if you ask me, because I think Crusade has the best tracks out of all three films. So next you're on the life raft riding down the snowy mountain alone, which suggests Willie and Short Round didn't make it. This is a nice change in gameplay. Now you're moving downhill in a third-person perspective while Mode 7 is doing its thing to make it look graphically impressive for its time. The level's pretty basic as you just dodge trees and jump gaps until the end, but it's not very long, so it doesn't get too annoying. The next level, you're in the Pancok Palace, where the whole gimmick is just to move these statues and try to progress through the level that way. And you just repeat until you're done. This is probably one of the weakest levels of the game for sure. The next couple stages are fairly simple in design, with the temple level having moving platforms to jump over the lava. And the mining cave has children that you save as you work through the level. Kinda like in Mega Man X6, where you rescue the injured Reploids. Finally, you're in the minecarts, and no, it's not like Donkey Kong Country. Here, you just need to hold down the shoot button and make sure you hit everything on the screen, including the rail switchers. Also, I can't help but notice that Indy is alone here again, so that confirms it. My suspicions that Willy and Short Round were left in the crashing airplane while Indy just jumps out and saves himself. The final stage in Temple of Doom is the famous bridge scene where you face off against Molaram. This was a super hard boss. In fact, it was so hard, I couldn't beat it to capture gameplay footage for this video. You've got Molaram throwing stones at you, the bridge is constantly falling apart, guys coming at you from the other side. This part kicked my ass, and I got a game over. No fortune and glory for me. This is a good time to mention how cool it is that they actually took sound clips from the movies and used them in a SNES game. Here you have Indy's dad, played by Sean Connery, saying, "I've lost him," as you get a game over.
I've lost him.
The Last Crusade begins in the catacombs of Venice, Italy. If you remember from the film, the whole area is flooded with petroleum water that eventually catches fire and causes Indy and Elsa to make a run for it to avoid the rushing flames. Well, the developers took that from the movie and made an entire level of it. Although Last Crusade is my favorite of the films, I gotta say, this level is extremely frustrating. You're meant to duck under the water whenever a wave of fire comes rushing in. These flames are a one-hit kill. If you don't duck in time, you're sent back to the beginning. And they come at you at what seems like random times. Look at that! I had like 1 second in between the flames. Look at this guy throwing knives like one of the Hammer Bros. He has no idea he's about to be engulfed in flames. I'm sure he'd rather be whipped to death than burned alive anyway. Okay, we're almost there. Just a little further. Okay. Oh, come on! Well, good thing this game has a password system. This actually comes in handy for players who just want to play through a certain movie rather than start from Raiders every time. And also for players who just can't beat the levels. Next, Indy is in the castle looking for tapestries. I mean, his dad, who's just sitting out in the open, waiting for Indy to rescue him, apparently. Just like in... So then you're outside on the roof of the castle, as the inside has already become completely engulfed in flames. This part is actually really tricky because you have to be super precise with your whip to swing across some of these areas. Another action platforming section after this, in the airship. This is supposed to be where Indy and his dad sneak in to steal the biplane, which is the next stage, and the final of the Mode 7 levels. This is probably the best one because you get to freely fly around the screen, dodging incoming enemies and planes, and try to shoot back at them, at least better than Henry Jones Sr. did from the movie. Skipping ahead to the final stage in the Grail Temple, this level is themed in the trials that Indy must pass through using the clues that his dad gave him. Except not really, because they use the first bit of the trials with the spinning blades only the penitent man can pass, and then just make the rest of the level up from there. It would have been nice to include a section involving some kind of platforming where you're on the words to spell out Jehovah, spelt with an I, of course. And then a final section in the level where you need to take some kind of leap of faith. But I'm not a game designer, so I have no clue what that would be. I'm just saying because the game takes you straight to the final boss against Donovan's skeletal remains, who throws his head at you and jumps around, which feels like a boss fight from Super Castlevania 4. But at this point, I'm just repeating the same thing, kinda like the soundtracks of this game. Well, I gotta say this game does have a lot of frustrating parts and some poor choices, but I still really like it. I think it's charming in its own way, and although it doesn't follow the films completely, I think it still does a service to the fans of Indiana Jones. And this is probably one of the best Indiana Jones games out there, which isn't saying much really, but I'm glad I chose this one to talk about. Yeah.
You have chosen wisely, for the Grail could not pass beyond the Great Seal. This is the boundary and the price of immortality.
But I'm glad I chose this one to talk about. Yeah. Aw.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
You have chosen